Hi. In this video, I'm going to give you some tips for solving physics word problems, and we're going to look at an example problem together. So some tips. First, I'd like to visualize the scenario that I'm given, or if I can, sketch it out, draw a picture of it. That always helps to create a mental image. I like to also identify the quantity needed to solve the problem. What is the question really asking me to solve? What do I need to figure out in order to answer the question? And then finally, work backwards from your target quantity that you need to find. This is the quantity you identified here. Work backwards from that target quantity to the ways that you can calculate the target quantity. How do you usually get that quantity that we need? How do I usually find that in my equations? So I like to think of solving physics problems like putting together a Lego set, but you don't have the instruction book. You know what the end result should look like, but you have to kind of think about how to piece together all the pieces that you've been given. That's how I like to think of physics problems. Let's look at an example problem involving speed. And to help solve some problems, I'm using a method that I've learned from some other physics teachers in the past. And it's helpful just because it's easy to remember. It's called the guess method. And it just helps me to identify different quantities. It helps me kind of stick to those tips of figuring out what I need to solve and how I can work backwards to solve for it. So let's look at the example here, and I want you to visualize this scenario as I read it. It says you are running late for an early morning Yahtzee team practice at school, which starts at 7:30 a.m. You leave your house at 7:11 a.m. and you live 12 miles from the school. What average speed will allow you to be on time to practice? All right, so we're going to do the thinking through of this problem by doing what I call the guess method. And this will help us identify these are the things that we know, and this is what we don't know. And then we'll try to piece it all together and work backwards and figure out what pieces go together to solve this problem. We're going to start with the G of the guess method, and the G stands for the given information. These are the things that the word problem gave us, the information that we know. And a lot of times this comes from the numbers you see in the word problem. So, for example, I see 12 miles. Okay, that is a distance measurement. I know that. So I'm going to take what I know about that unit, miles, and I'm going to identify that as a distance. So I'm going to write delta x, representing the distance. The change in position is 12 miles. And then I know that the time that it took was 19 minutes because it went from 7:11 to 7:30. So I did 30 minus 11. That gives me 19 minutes to get to the school. And now I'm going to change this unit from minutes into hours because we're going to calculate the speed in miles per hour rather than miles per minute. And so I'm going to do 19 multiplied by this conversion factor to cancel out the minutes. I'll end up doing 19 divided by 60, and that'll give me 0.32 hours. The second part of the guess method is called the desired unknown step. I've underlined the U here because we're trying to spell out the word guess. This is the part where you identify, this is my target quantity. This is what I want to know to solve the problem. Usually you can find this by looking at the last sentence of the word problem because that usually has the question in it. And so it says, what average speed will allow you to be on time to practice? So we're looking for the average speed. That one's pretty easy to identify. And so I'm going to write down here, V average equals question mark. This is what I don't know. This represents, in physics language, the average speed. The E step is for equation. So this is where we start to work backwards. We know this is what we want. Now we need to work backwards and figure out what do we need to know in order to get the average speed. Usually we find average speed by doing the distance divided by the time. So I'm going to write that equation here. The distance over time gives me the average speed. The S step, the first S step, is substitute. So we're going to substitute in the numbers that we've written over here if they're relevant. If they fit into our equation, we put those pieces in. And so the distance, I put in 12 miles, and the time, I put in 0.32 hours. And then the final part of this is to solve, spelling out the guess method. And so we solve by dividing those two, 37.5 miles per hour. I'm going to round that to 38 miles per hour. And that is a kind of a basic framework for how to solve these problems. But please remember that this guess method is not like a step-by-step instruction guide. Rather, it's just some reminders as you think through how to piece together all the missing pieces to make your final product, like trying to put together a Lego set that you don't have the instructions for. You're still going to have to do a lot of thinking to figure out how it all fits together. These are just here to remind you about some different parts of that process of putting the puzzle together. So that's all I've got for you in this video. Remember, everything you have is a gift.